Awesome, let's get started. So welcome to Arke's latest masterclass, Identifying and Communicating Your Brand Values. A few housekeeping bits first of all. The session will last for about 40 minutes and there'll be time for a Q&A at the end. So do use the chat function and the Q&A function throughout if you have any questions or queries, and our speakers will answer them at the end. We are fully encouraging engagement on social this morning. So if you want to take part in the conversation, just use the hashtag ArkeBrandMC. So let's kick things off by introducing you to your speakers for this morning's masterclass. My name's Mike and I'm the marketing manager here at Arke, and I'm going to be joined by two of our creative geniuses without meaning to big them up too much. So we've got Scott Black, who is Arke's creative manager, and Alfie Stevenson Kelly, who is one of our creatives. So let's start with a little bit about Arke. We are a marketing agency who unravel your data to paint a picture and tell stories to people who will love your brand. We are intelligent marketing. We inspire curiosity into human behavior to help people better understand people. And through that unification of creativity, data science, and technology, we see the what, discover the why, and produce strategies that excite and experiences that work. So how do we do it? Put simply, our core services are all about stories, which we tell through our content and creative services, intelligence, so analytics and data science, and audiences, which involves advertising and getting your company seen. So we're just going to flick through a couple of bits of branding work that we've done in the past, including this one for King's College Entrepreneurship Institute, and we'll go into it in a little bit more detail later. So our creative department at Arke is where all of our ideas come to life. Our experienced team, including Scott and Alf, really help brands to tell their story with seamless continuity. They will align your vision, unearth your values, and put what you stand for at the front of everything you say and do, from brand guidelines and campaign concepts to bespoke visual content toolkits and everything in between. They produce modern and attention-grabbing artwork. Right, on to the last bit of the introduction. This is what we hope you'll be taking away from this morning. Firstly, and most importantly, a brand is more than a color palette and a logo. It's about a perceived experience. Secondly, your brand kind of comprises of four core components. So we've got your USP, your target audience, your brand story, and your design. And finally, your brand is the most powerful marketing tool you have in your arsenal, so use it wisely. Right, now the moment you've all been waiting for, let's get on with the content of today's session. So first up, what is a brand? Scott, over to you.
Hello. Right, so yeah, diving in, what is a brand? So it's always a very good place to start at the beginning and understand the fundamentals of something. Apologies in advance if we're going to teach anyone to suck eggs in this section. I just think it's good to cover all the basics. So there's loads of definitions all over about what a brand is, but we try to boil it down to five key points of what a brand is. So to kind of iterate what Mike was saying at the very beginning, driving home that first point early, a brand is more than a color palette and logo. So a brand is a perceived experience. A brand could also be defined as how all the parts of your company work together to create an image. It's also seen as an idea, a gut feeling, and a story that lives in the customer's mind. It's also an emotional experience that your customer has when they interact with you on any level. And finally, you can also see a brand as a promise that your customer believes in. I like to think that a brand is what your company says when you say nothing at all, to quote the legend that is Ronan Keating. So from one legend to another, here's Martin Newman, whose surname I've probably just butchered, but he's the author of Brand Gap, which if you've not read, I would highly recommend getting stuck into. It's a very eye-opening bit of literature on brand perception. And in that, he famously says that a brand is not a logo, a brand is not an identity, a brand is not a product. A brand is a person's gut feeling about a product, service, or organization. So a brand, I like to say, as you can see from this lovely visual, is the intersection between art and science. So as I said, from this beautiful piece of art here, I think the best way we can kind of surmise what a brand is coming back to what we said about the brand not just being a logo or a set of colors. Of course, there's that element of kind of design, and that's the shop window of our brand, but there's a science behind it, and there's those foundations of purpose or method. These aren't just random decisions. It's a carefully curated identity that is more than just a visual exploration. And we have to look at the science and research to understand how our brand should interact with the wider world. So I think a great example of a brand is Lady Gaga. So I'd like to think that everyone here is kind of aware who Lady Gaga is. She's a very iconic celebrity. And the reason for that is she's very carefully curated her brand and image. I think it's safe to say that Lady Gaga isn't everyone's cup of tea. For some, she may not even be the best singer out there, which is a controversial opinion, but maybe. But I think this is a very purposeful decision by Lady Gaga and the team behind her. She's put a lot of effort into curating her image and understanding her audience and capturing attention like no other. And there's a lot to learn from the way she presents herself. So in the beginning, Lady Gaga was often rejected from when pursuing music. She was considered a misfit, described as being a bit too provocative, too eccentric. But rather than let all these negatives prevent her from pursuing her dream, she then doubled down and used those exact negative points to curate an incredible brand. So as I said, rather than shy away from the traits that caused her initial rejection from the industry, she then instead began to associate with audiences that embraced her larger-than-life approach. So Lady Gaga specifically targeted people within the LGBTQ community with her raw, provocative style. She's honest with her opinions, with what she stands for, and she very clearly has a signature style. She also has a purpose as well, and is very much an ally of the communities and groups in which she's successful. She's very vocal about where she stands on issues and what she stands for. Lady Gaga, who is someone who's created a very strong personal brand. And to go from one icon to another, this is Wally Oland's. So if you don't know who Wally is, he's one of the founding partners of Wolf Ollins, a branding agency, and he's known as the father of territory branding. He once said, which I think is a really lovely quote, if branding can, in its strange, illogical, emotional way, encourage people to develop a close rapport with soft drinks, hamburgers, and running shoes, what will it be able to do when its power is realized for genuine, significant, worthwhile activities? And we touch upon this a little later on. So I've got a quick case study here that just to dive into a brand on a company called Thistle Farms. So Thistle Farms are an American-based company who sell beauty and cosmetic products. Their whole brand is based around their values, which is a very prominent feature on their website and marketing. So Thistle Farms' mission is all based around the concept of love heals, and they do that through their employment, the products they create. So if we see on the next slide, we can see their mission. So we can see here that basically Thistle Farms specifically deal with women who've been victims of prostitution, trafficking, and addiction. And what they've done through their company is they've created a home for these people. So within the company, as well as selling the beauty products, they offer a residential program, which is a 2-year program providing survivors a safe place to live, as well as a job. From that, they also get a national network, a community of other survivors for them to continue to grow and build. And as well as that, they get global shared trade. So Thistle Farms are actually putting their money back into the community. So what I really like about that is, you know, a lot of these people are coming from physical, mental, and economic difficult situations, and Thistle Farms made their brand all about that. So on the next slide, we've got one of the founders, and again, even down to the name. So the name Thistle Farms comes from the misunderstood thistle. It's the only flower to grow on the streets and alleys where the women's of Thistle Farms have walked. It's considered a weed by many, but the thistle has a deep root that can shoot through concrete and survive drought. In spite of its prickly appearance, its soft purple flower and profound healing qualities make the thistle a mysterious and gorgeous flower. The thistle has become a symbol of survival and healing for our community and women survivors around the globe. And if they hadn't successfully curated all of this brand, we wouldn't be having this conversation about them today. So a really nice simple slide, just to iterate the point, everything is branded. Everything that you touch, everything that you see, everything that you hear, it is all branded. Even when you aren't actively contributing towards your brand, you are still developing a brand. So that pixelated logo on your website, the 30-second load time, it all contributes psychologically to your audience perception of what your company is and what's important to your company. So even by saying nothing, you say everything. And what we want to do today is to try get you guys thinking actively about how you can just go from contributing towards your brand's development rather than just passively letting it build. So to go on to that and understand a bit more about the psychology behind brand perception, we've got a little quick case study here about wine tasting. Unfortunately, we haven't got any wine here to pass around for everyone today, but if you want to grab a glass, go ahead. It's 12 o'clock somewhere. So you're probably wondering how this all connects to branding. So there's a lovely neuroscientist called Leanne Schmidt who conducted a study on the link between the price of wine and its taste, a study I'm sure we can all get behind. And in that study, over 50 students were given various wines whilst all hooked up to an MRI machine and asked to grade that wine on a 9-point scale. So part of the process is the volunteers were shown the bottle and the associated price before consuming. However, the catch was all the wine was exactly the same. So as we would probably all guess, the wine that people were told is more expensive received the better scores. However, what I find really interesting about this study is that this wasn't just an opinion people were giving to save face in front of Leanne. This was something that was actually causing a physical change within their brain. So the more expensive the wine, the more activity was recorded in their medial prefrontal cortex and ventral striatum, which for anyone like me, who has no idea what's going on with the brain, that's where the risk and reward place in your brain is. That's where you're working out when you're receiving a good reward. And our brains actively change their perception, taste, when confronted with a stimulus price. So I think it's a really powerful way of showing the impact of brand perception. So over to you, Alf.
So hi guys, yeah, nice to meet you all. Hope you're having a good day. So Scott's kind of gone over what brand is, kind of really given us a good overview, and now just kind of want to talk about why is brand important, like have that discussion, and why anyone here should even care about brand. And I assume you're all here because you do care about brand. So we've got a few sort of stats that I think are really important and things that can kind of sit in the back of your head to think over. And we live in a society now that is really over communicated, and everyone is fighting to stand out above the noise. Everyone wants to be in the shop window and be seen first. But a few stats that's interesting here is like it takes 5 to 7 interactions to remember a brand. Presenting a brand consistently can increase brand revenue by up to 23%. You already have a brand whether you're actively creating it or not. So using a signature color can increase brand recognition by 80%, which is an absolutely crazy stat that I didn't believe. 77% of consumers buy from brands who share the same values as them. It does mean a lot to people. And 79% of people say that user-generated content highly impacts their purchasing decisions. So having authentic contribution to your brand from either consumer or people outside of your organization has a massive impact. And that again is going to contribute to your brand, your audience's brand perception. But just before we move on, don't forget to submit any questions and we'll answer them at the end. So now, what comprises a brand? We touched upon earlier, but in our opinion, there are really sort of 4 key pillars of a brand that we would say. And again, these are good things that I think you should just be thinking in the back of your head to go through if you are aware of these things. So the USP, or unique selling proposition, the target audience, the brand story, the visual design. How clear are those 4 pillars in your brands? But I'll let Scott go over more of these sort of pillars in detail with some examples. So back over to you, Scott.
Cheers, Alf. So those 4 things that Alf mentioned, when all of these are put together, they should help you identify and communicate your brand values, the whole point of everyone being here. So the first one that we brought up was your USP, or your unique selling proposition. So again, just to make sure everyone's on the same page, that's a 1-sentence statement that you own to differentiate your brand from your competitors. So it should set you apart and clearly communicate a big idea. And it needs to do it so simply that the manager, the intern, the CEO, anyone can repeat that USP. And it should be the core of everything you do at the moment, and also everything that's going to come in the future. It's your guiding light. And we've got a few examples of brands that do this really well. So the first one up, again, Thistle Farms. not being paid to promote them, but if they want to chuck us some free stuff, go for it. So Thistle Farms, their whole USP is that they offer a safe place for women survivors to heal and work. So again, in the case study we looked at earlier, it really combines everything they do from a branded perspective, from their story to their target audience and the design. Everything's quite harmonious. The second example I have, an old but gold, and I think it's really one of the most powerful USPs ever. This bold statement, but it's a really powerful example. And the whole USP of Avis is we're not number two, so we try harder. So this was obviously Avis was ranked the second best car rental company, and as a result, their whole ethos is because we're not number one, we're going to try harder to deliver a better customer service. And the reason I love this one so much is because they've taken what is a really negative quality. No one wants to say we're number two. And they've turned that into a really core, powerful, positive message for their brand. And then the final one is a e-commerce company called Tattly. So as I said, e-commerce company, surprise, surprise, that you'll find on the internet. And essentially they make fake tattoos. So their whole USP is fake tattoos by real artists. So fake tattoos, whenever I think of them, I think of 5-year-olds with Spider-Man on their face at a birthday party. However, Tattly's whole concept is they want to make fake tattoos that are made of real beautiful art that can be sold to adults in a serious way. And I think they play on this USP really nicely. So when it comes to defining your USP, there are 4 ways that you can go about doing this. So the first way that you can define your USP is through finding a need and fulfilling it. So that's an existing mutual desire. So a good example for this is the lady who invented Spanx, Sarah Blakely. So she actually invented the first ever pair for herself and then realized afterwards, actually, this is probably something that a lot of women would like to have access to. So she found a mutual existing desire. So the second one you can do is specialize in a category. So when we talk about specializing in a category, the first person that comes to mind is everyone's favorite South African, Elon Musk. So rather than just making anything that moves, Elon Musk specifically specializes in sustainable electrical transportation. So the third one, which is perhaps the most abstract one of them all, is a non-existing desire or a brand new solution. I don't have an example for this because it's a non-existing desire. It doesn't exist yet. We usually see these kind of things come through innovation in technology. And as I said, these things don't exist. However, there's a really nice quote by Henry Ford, which I think sums up the idea of a non-existing desire. So when Henry Ford talked about his customers, he said that if I'd asked what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. And I think this is a great example of innovation and how sometimes you don't know what a customer needs before they know themselves. And then the final example is curating your USP based around the experience you offer. So an example of an experience-first company is Nap York, who are based in the center of New York. And their whole premise is they are a place where you can go and literally rent out a pod to sleep in during your lunch break. And this whole environment is curated to be a really serene, relaxing place in the middle of one of the busiest cities on earth. So they very much sell on their experience. So another way that you can go about discovering where you sit in the world is through perceptual mapping. So perceptual mapping is a visual technique that's designed to show how the average target market consumer understands the positioning of competing products in the marketplace. Typically, this revolves around quality and price, which we've got here on the right-hand side. However, you may not be particularly interested in the price of your product or the quality of it. Maybe you want to focus on its luxuriousness or how environmentally friendly you are. So that's the example, for example, that we've got on the left here. So you can see how it works in a different context and you can plot yourself against the things that really matter. So in a nutshell, it basically refers to the consumer's understanding of the competing products and their associated attributes and where you fit into all of that. So I'll hand back over to Alf.
So yeah, that really nicely segues into me talking about target audience. So, you know, your product or service that you're selling is not going to be designed for everyone. The chances are, for the position you take, you will have a specific audience in mind. And knowing your target audience will help you gain clarity, creates accurate messaging, and it will help to define your values and also help to inform your designs. Understand your audience journey. It's a process, constant review. There'll be refinement and plenty of readjustment. But understandably, there's been a global pandemic, so consumer needs, motivations, and behaviours have changed huge over the last 18 months. So you're going to want to consider some more questions, because I'm loving giving you people questions. So here's another few I've got here. So who is your ideal customer? What are my customer pain points? What pain points do you solve? And lastly, who needs this product or service? And that moves on to Scott's section.
Cheers, Alf. So another way that you can break down your audience and identify your tribe of users is to use this matrix. So in the example, you've used Lush. So to start with, you'd be looking at what your audience is interested in. So with Lush, they're interested in cruelty-free cosmetics and good quality products. What they share. So our audience is going to be sharing skincare tips, videos, tutorials. However, Lush has a really strong activist community. So there's going to be a lot of activism content shared within that tribe as well. So then we need to start thinking about what does the audience get from Lush and how do they feel about the products or services? So Lush would want their audience to feel good about buying cruelty-free cosmetics. So what the audience would need from the content that Lush produces, they would want inspiration, reassurance that Lush live their lives by values that they can connect to them, and comparison with competitor products so that they know they're getting the best quality. So when we start to think about the content that Lush's audience is consuming and how much, again, content about skincare, vegan cosmetics, and we know that they're spending roughly 2 hours a day on social media looking at this content. And the conversations that they're engaging with, as we referenced earlier, Lush has a strong community in activism. So there's going to be a lot of conversations around climate change, Black Lives Matter, cruelty-free protests, etc. And what the audience would like about Lush is that they should like everything Lush is doing to be cruelty-free, sustainable, and eco-friendly all the way through their supply chain. And how often they buy, we found that they were buying once a month for themselves and at regular intervals for for presents, so birthdays, Christmases, bar mitzvahs, all sorts. And then on the next bit, so as we go through this, you should find that we are in fact repeating ourselves, because that means we're starting to understand the audience and those kind of aggregating factors and values between our audience tribe and us as a brand. So we should find that, again, questions they're asking about is they're going to want to know, is Lush actually cruelty-free? How do you go about mitigating the impact that you create on the environment? And are your products as good as they say they are? So again, things that they're going to care about: environment, animal testing, sustainability, things they've already engaged with. So in stores where they're mainly engaging with the brand, social media, websites, email, they're also engaging with Lush's competitors. And due to the age of the audience, the majority of people are engaging with Lush on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. And the needs that they're going to find is probably the need for the best quality skincare and cosmetics possible. So those driving factors in deciding their purchase are going to be quality and price and desire to be good to the environment. So the influence that a lot of those audience members receive are through the main channels that they use, so the TikTok and the Instagram that we spoke about, but within those community, there will also be influencing channels and individuals that will impact decisions. And as well as that, there's mainstream media and how that reports on cruelty-free and eco-friendly products. So once you understand that, the next place to go is to your brand story. So a really great way of surmising the concept of story for me is this quote by Ian Forster, who's a late great novelist. And he said, "The king died and then the queen died is a plot. The king died and the queen died of grief is a story." And I think that really highlights how a brand is an emotional narrative that opens up an opportunity for your customers to resonate with your own story. Without a compelling story, you're just another nameless company who's asking for someone's time or money. But how can you go about defining your brand story? So the first way that you can go about defining your brand story is through a concept. So a good example is Nike and their strapline, "Just Do It." Just Do It is a very abstract concepts that they can then take into their marketing and apply to different narratives as they progress through the world. So, for example, with their recent campaign surrounding Black Lives Matter, the whole concept of Just Do It created a campaign that was about persevering through racial injustice. The second way that you could go about creating a brand story would be through a personal narrative. So that's where you as an individual have had a really strong and compelling story that has provoked you to create a business. And, you know, 9 out of 10 businesses don't trek to the top of the Himalayas and have an epiphany which causes them to start functioning. It's usually a lot less sexy than that. And, you know, this should only be pushed for when the personal narrative is really there within your brand. And then the third way you can go about that is through a manifesto, which is something we use here at Arke. So a manifesto is a document which essentially just lists the actions and what you're trying to do and achieve. And it's also about the journey you've been on. And it should kind of serve as a rallying cry to you, your employees, and everyone you deal with. And it should be a simple document that you can create yourself. So over to Mike.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. So all of this leads us really nicely onto this brand values ladder, or value proposition, as we've termed it here. And we're getting to the point now where everything really starts to come together and you can produce one of these. So what is a value proposition? I mean, it's sometimes referred to as brand values, brand purpose, brand DNA, core attributes, brand promise, brand personality, brand essence. We all call it different things, and I'm sure you will have heard all of those used or some of them. But fundamentally, they're all the same thing, really. As we've been saying over the last kind of half an hour or so, you have to get inside the brain cells of your customer and think about it from their point of view. That's the reason why we exist, right? So you want them to think certain things about your brand when they think about your brand. You might know kind of what you want to position from the work that you've done in those previous steps and who you want to position to, but what level do you want to position them, which is where this benefits ladder comes in. So if you start at the bottom, you've got the product, followed by product features, which are things about the product itself. And as you move up the ladder, you've got product benefits. So they're the benefits that your customers accrue because of those features, which is then followed by customer benefits and the emotional benefits, which is all about how your products can hopefully, and this is the aim, make your target customers feel. Now, let's be realistic. As much as we might always want to, you can't always be at the top of the ladder. Not everything is emotional. But the higher up the ladder you climb, the more attractive and powerful your brand positioning or values become, which leads us nicely onto the next slide, where we've got Walmart as an example. Now, I'm sure many of you are aware of what Walmart is or who Walmart is. If you're not, they are the world's biggest retailer. They are absolutely massive. So if we start, this kind of shows it, this I guess process is never too big for anyone at all. So at step one, we've obviously got Walmart as the product, and then moving up, we've got product features. So they offer the lowest prices around. That's typically what they're known for. However, and actually this is kind of a case study of what they actually did, and we'll lead on to the end result in a minute. But the problem with it being all about price is that eventually that stops working. So customers kind of no longer wanted to go in for high-end goods they may have been selling, and high-end consumers wouldn't be seen dead in Walmart. Therefore, they needed to reposition themselves. Now, as we climb the ladder, we start to think about the emotional connection to those low prices. What does it allow the family to do? Like we said, you can't reposition Walmart, but you can take the product feature of the low prices and climb the ladder with it. So we've got low-cost goods that allow customers to save money when they shop at Walmart. And actually, as part of this process, they commissioned research to show just how much the average family would save if they shopped at Walmart, which leads us nicely onto what that overall benefit is. They can live better, which then kind of as a result really naturally leads us onto the emotional benefit of customers feeling good about their family, about their lives, what they're able to do on a weekend. They can go on a road trip. They can do kind of whatever they want as a result of them shopping at Walmart and being able to save a lot of money, which leads us nicely onto this logo, which they still use to this day, which is Walmart, save money, live better. Now, all of this, kind of before we go on to the final step about communicating your brand values, this should really start to culminate in something like this brand values matrix, which again, we've used Lush as an example. So you can see in the left-hand column who are Lush, as we've been through, they're cruelty-free, everything that they stand for is synonymous with those values that you can see in the second column. And then we really start to tie in the target audience research that you were doing. So what do your values look like to your clients? How does each one kind of make them feel? Which then leads us into how do they increase perceived value? As Scott said at the start, it's all about perception. And really, we're wanting to use our brand to increase revenue, to really drive the bottom line. So, and it's not just that, but there's an element of that. So how does that, those brand values that I've identified, how do they increase that perceived value? Which, Scott, back over to you. Pass the baton, the final baton.
Thank you. I've managed to not talk on mute the whole time, and I'm incredibly proud of myself. So the final pillar that we're going to go through is the pillar of design. So with your USP defined and the target audience identified, you've got your brand story. We need to now think about how we communicate this visually. So design helps us to communicate intangible ideas in tangible ways. And even something as small as your font can change perception. So I've got a quick example here from Sarah Hindman, who's a leading graphic designer who conducted a study on the influence font has on human perception. So to surmise it, people were essentially offered a jelly bean and had to eat it looking at one or two fonts. And one of the fonts was soft and one was jagged. So the results, the jagged font, when consuming the jelly bean, saw a reported bitterness of an increase in 17%. And then, whereas in comparison, eating the bean in front of the soft font saw an increase of 11% in the sweetness reported of the jelly bean. So I think that really just goes to show that something that a lot of people would consider as small and insignificant as your font can have a massive influence on how you're perceived. And to talk through a bit more about the kind of design process, we've got Alfie here to go through one of our own.
Thanks, Scott. So we, as cheesy as it is, we have our own work that we can show as a case study, but we're also really proud and think it really represents kind of what we've been speaking about in this sort of session. Hopefully you can kind of see that method we've been using as we run through. But I've been working with a client at King's College London called the Entrepreneurship Institute, and they were founded in 2015, and they support and celebrate entrepreneurial thinking, skills and startups. They're a leader in higher education enterprise, and the Institute upskills and empowers the King's community through a series of flagship events that they run across the year. So we successfully designed a magazine, their annual magazine called Start. And we've got a case study of this on our website if you want to see more. However, what happened with the end of the magazine is the Institute felt really inspired the way we followed a process. And they wanted to bring the rest of their sort of style, their look and feel up to the same level. So the old sort of style that they had, that identity, it was sort of this accumulation of assets they had lying around, a few mocks that were kind of roughed up in Canva, and it was just about functional. However, they didn't really have a sort of style guide, and there was a real lack of consistency to even be recognized by anyone in the community or outside of King's College. And the guys put a lot of work in, so we wanted to help and get them seen. So how did we go about that? So the process we began immediately was we collaborate with the client to kind of identify their values, their vision and mission. And it's a very collaborative experience where we kind of all align, and we have this in our sort of discovery phase where we'll go through workshops and that sort of collaborative research to find out what sometimes the client doesn't even realize is what they're really looking for. So during the discovery workshops, we came out with this sort of sentence that was formed, which was, the Institute is here to nurture entrepreneurial curiosity, to develop entrepreneurial skills and aspirations for creative problem solving, to help devise and progress disruptive ideas, as well as to start and scale ventures. That was kind of what came out, that discovery, that they were really proud, that felt like that represented them. So what happened with them findings and other research that happens in that discovery phase, we would develop these into sort of mood boards and stylescapes. And a stylescape's kind of like a mood board on steroids. It's more than just imagery, it's type, it's more touch and feel, kind of encapsulates all of the sort of a style and a brand. So sort of them with them raw components, as well as tone, style, language, sort of all aligned with ourselves and the client and the stakeholders, we would then make a visual concept sort of presented in mock-ups. And then when the concepts would be approved, sort of all the key stakeholders would move to production, and then we would create sort of style guides and a style toolkit that would allow any member of the client's team to sort of create consistent visuals with sort of editable templates. And the good thing with having templates with teams that have a variety of skill level means a lot more things go out consistently, and people can be upskilled and learn. When you have a template, it's kind of that sort of blueprint. It helps people learn more about that sort of design. But, you know, what was the thinking about behind the visuals? It's nice to have a few pretty pictures and to say we did all of this, but is there, you know, an actual meaning behind these sort of paint strokes that you've been seeing as we've been flicked through? So that visual system is made of a combination of these sort of moving brush strokes. And the Institute, they're about so these represent the Institute's sort of progressive pathways that happen on their course. So members will go on these, and they're sort of these deliberate, sort of smaller and thinner paint strokes that would be used in combination with normally like a larger paint stroke. And that's to kind of represent their moments of choice that members would be going on, them sort of decisions and that show of progression that they go on across like the year. So, you know, here, as we've gone through a range of sort of them templates, marketing material, and documentation as well, trying to cover a real large range of sort of brand output and just make their sort of style and look and feel be seen consistently by the audience. And yeah, I'll pass you back over to Mike to give a short summary.
And thanks, Alf. So yeah, finally to wrap up and summarize what we've been through with you all this morning. Arguably, that biggest and most important takeaway, that your brand is more than a color palette and a logo. It's often seen as that's what it is, but it is so much more than that. It really is about a perceived experience, and hopefully we've demonstrated that this morning. Like we said, your brand is built on 4 core components. You've got your USP, your target audience, your brand story, and your design, all of which really comes together to help you identify what those brand values are. And last but not least, your brand is the most powerful marketing tool you have in your arsenal. I'm not sure how the Arsenal fan in this presentation has got that word in, but he somehow has. But it really is super important. Don't rush it and don't ruin it. It's kind of our biggest advice. So before we get on to questions, we actually have a little special offer for you all. So we're offering all of our attendees one of our free brand toolkits, which essentially includes all of the matrices, tables, questions, and charts that we've been through today, as well as a couple of added extras, including the content calendar and a little scheduler, just to really help you get on the path to identifying and communicating your brand values, and yeah, really cementing what your brand stands for. If you'd like a copy of the toolkit, do keep your eyes peeled on your inbox shortly after the webinar ends. And last but not least, huge thank you for attending our brand masterclass. We hope you found it useful and insightful. Don't forget about the offer. And if you want to find out more, do drop us an email at hello@arkeagency.com or give us a call on 01273 041 111. So I know we've been through a lot in the last 39 minutes or so. So if you want a copy of the slides, just drop us an email again on that email address and we'll get them sent over. Before we jump into questions, I can see we've had some come through. We just wanted to ask, as kind of a personal favour for me, if you'd be able to kind of fill out the survey that will appear when the masterclass ends. It will really help us to provide even better sessions, and you can help shape what the next webinars will cover. This particular session came off the back of feedback from the last one we did, and it's one of a series that is coming up. So keep your eyes peeled for invites for those over the coming months. So without further ado, any questions? I can see, like I said, we've had a few come in. So if we get stuck into them, and if you keep any of the others coming through, and I'm going to be question master, and I'm going to let the guys take over because they know what they're talking about. So Alfie and Scott, let's start with, what are your favorite brands and why? don't all jump in at once.
I'll go first. I feel like it's between me and Scott who's going to unmute first. Obviously, Sam is clearly a massive fan of asking questions as well, which is great. I don't know. I feel like a brand that always sticks out to me is, I think Burger King, I think are great. I think early this year they had a rebrand, but I think the way that they approach as well, how they put brands out there, I think is very clever, and they're very aware of what they stand for, what they do. And I think with that sort of confidence and how they can put that out, just works so well, especially when they're against such large competitors like McDonald's and others. You know, I feel having that confidence and not being afraid and being aware of what you are and what you stand for and your values, I think really echoes through their recent rebrand. I'll let Scott, if you've got one to throw one out there.
Yeah, still waiting for the plug from Thistle Farms, but they do a really good job. But another one that I find quite good is Spotify. I think Spotify have a really strong brand, as not just from a visual point of view, which I love, also from a way that they use the individual user experience to pull out individual narratives to talk about that brand experience. So I'm sure we've all seen the billboards in London of, you know, to the person who listened to Justin Bieber's Sorry like 8,000 times, what did you do? Like, so I really enjoy the way that they play with that data. And I feel that they really bring a strong ethos of, you know, they don't want you to be anything other than you and to have your experience and enjoy listening to the things that you enjoy listening to. So for me, they're a really strong brand.
Awesome. And then we've got one about our own brand evolution. And I know we've been on a journey over the last kind of 18 months, so that you guys are very much at the heart of. I think it's kind of a nice case study in a way to show the process that we went on. I don't know whether you guys can just talk through very quickly the steps we went and kind of, yeah, why our documents look the way they do and things like that.
Yeah, so we went through a brand evolution, we'll call it, like over the past 18 months as we adapted our brand, as we grew. And a big part of Arke and who we are is our location. You know, we're very much involved in the community of Brighton, and you know, this isn't just from a visual point of view. So visually, we really communicate our roots through the textures that we use. So all the textures that you see in our slides and colors have all been taken from Brighton. So we kind of literally went around Brighton and we were doing some like rubbings of all the textures, taking photographs and converting those all into brushes that we could then use to kind of decorate all the digital and physical assets that we have. But as well as that, again, just to push past the idea of brand being colors and textures and logos, a big part of our brand and our stay within Brighton is we own a passion projects committee. So we actively make sure that we're using our skills and services to give back to the community in which we're placed in, because that's something we really strongly believe in.
Awesome. So we've got two questions, which are kind of similar, kind of not. We'll start with how do you involve or how do I involve my brand visuals while still being recognizable as the same brand?
I think it's a good question. What I would first say is why do you want to evolve? Are you evolving because you're sick of looking at the same color, or you're evolving because your business service or products have shifted in the past kind of 12 months or so? If that is the case, then definitely I would say if your business model, if the core of the way your business is operating has changed, then you need to strip things back, start looking at that USP, because if your services and products have changed, then what you're delivering is also going to have changed in terms of an experience. So I would say it's about questioning why you need to rebrand. And then if you know, on the other side, if you want to rebrand because no one is recognizing your brand, then I would question whether the recognizability is still, you know, apparent in that instant. But I don't know if you have anything to add on top of that, Alf.
I think, yeah, like how you explaining about brand evolution, I think brands never has an expiry date. I think they do evolve and things naturally will evolve. But at the core, your brand, your values, what you stand for, your mission, story should all still be the same. It's just the occasional sort of update. Sometimes if you look at big corporate companies, their logos maybe have small adjustments, and it's just small bits that are benefiting the company, whether it's assistance for certain things where it's templates, or whether it's updating visuals that feel more up to date with, how things are becoming more digital. So yeah, I definitely think it evolves, but it's always important to say why you're evolving. There shouldn't be anything too drastic, I think, and that normally happens with these big companies where they're not doing drastic change, because at the core, principles of what they have, their values, are still the exact same, and they're still living by them. Why it's so important that when we do sort of these sessions like we do with our clients, that discovery phase is to really understand what your brand stands for and what you want to do, and build from that.
Awesome. So I think we've got 2 final questions. If anyone's got any others, feel free to pop them in. But how can you, this is everyone's biggest fear, how can you avoid making a brand story too cliche?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I think cliches are cliches for a reason. There's an element of truth in all of them. And I think it's about, if you feel that your brand story is perhaps a bit too cliche, you might be operating in an oversaturated market where the products and services aren't too dissimilar to what your competitors can offer. So at that point, I would then strip back. So maybe it's not about the product or service, but it's about the people who are delivering that product or service. What do you do that separates you from those individuals? And yeah, I think if something feels a bit too cliche, it's probably a sign that you need to dig a little deeper, strip things back a bit more. And I would say that, that there's more to discover, because everyone does operate and do things slightly differently. So there should never be an instance where, even if you're selling the exact same product or service, the people who are doing it are different at company A to company B. So that is a difference in itself. But again, it can be about what you believe in as an individual. You might be selling, like I said, the same thing as someone else, but you're a lot more passionate about your community and being involved in that way than company B. So I think it's about, digging a little bit deeper past those cliches, but I think they are a good place to start, because there is some truth in them. And again, Alf, I don't know if you have anything to add on top of that.
No, I think you covered it. I think definitely it's about, don't be, it's cliche, you want to be unique, you want to stand out, you need to take a different approach. And I think how Scott's covered it is the exact way. Think more about what your team, what you can offer that's different to others, more you can dig in than just maybe the products. But yeah, I think good answer was coming from Scott.
Awesome. And then the last 2 questions, we will yet be sending a recording round to everyone who attended and those who didn't as well. It'll be on our YouTube page. So for whatever reason, the email doesn't land in your inbox, it goes in your junk, just have a look at our YouTube page over the next day and it'll be on there. And last but not least, probably quite a nice way to end it actually. Do you have any recommended reading to further my understanding of what brand is? I know we've got some books dotted around the office. This is a challenge to reel the titles off and the authors.
Yeah, so you'll probably notice we sandwiched in a lot of quotes in this masterclass, and the reason for that is because these are books that will inspire us. So the first one we mentioned was Martin Numier's The Brand Gap, which I would thoroughly recommend reading. And I think if you dig around on the internet, you can even find a PDF version of it to click through. But I would thoroughly recommend going through that as kind of an introduction. Again, Wally Ollins has written a lot of books. I think one of his most famous ones is The Brand Handbook. I think in terms of communicating with your audience, I would recommend, one of the godfathers of advertising, Ogilvy. He's written a lot of books about kind of the way that we communicate with audience. And if you're looking maybe to think about how you're communicating, I think Understanding Media is a very good book as well, which I would recommend. Alf, I'm sure, has a lot more as well.
I mean, there are so many out there. It depends kind of what you're particularly looking for, because branding differs from different sectors to different approaches, how people handle data to how people handle language. I think current reading that I've been doing is how-to books by Arke, and it talks about sort of graphic design journey and how branding has been evolved from the sort of late 80s to now, and how branding has had to evolve along with this, especially with sort of digitization and how people move stuff from publication work to online to handling of data visualization. So that's another good book, How To, and I think it's just been revised and came out this year, but good one to look.
Awesome. So I think all that's left for me to do is thank everyone very much for attending this morning. If you do have any questions, feel free to fire them over hello@arkeagency.com, and we'll answer them. And we'll do a little blog with a roundup of the Q&A as well. Just there's been some really useful bits that the guys have said. And keep your eyes peeled for both the offer and the recording, which will be landing in your inbox very soon. And yeah, and invites to the next sessions. That's all for us. Thank you very much.
Thank you guys. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks. Have a good day.
Bye.